Chapter 199, 48 times. Kang Qian was slightly surprised. It seemed that this Zhu Wuxiang was indeed extraordinary. It must be known that this elderly, who was sitting in the Forge-Chuan Hall, was very powerful. Rumor had it that he was about to break through the harmonization stage, and when he did, he would be promoted to a sealed elder. On top of Dark Gold Peak, Elder Li's status was very high. After coming to the Forge-Chuan Hall for so many days, it was the first time he had seen Elder Li waking up from cultivation, and personally receiving a cultivator who had come to test. From this, it could be seen that Zhu Wuin's status was above Dark Gold Peak. Of course, if Kang Qian had made his identity known, this Elder Li would have personally received him as well. However, Kang Qian had always kept a low profile. He wasn't as arrogant as Zhu Wuin. So as long as he wasn't seen by Elder Li with his own eyes, his identity wouldn't be exposed. In fact, Elder Li didn't even think that Kang Qian was hidden amongst the crowd. In his opinion, if it was a disciple of the Elder of Law Enforcement who came here, it would have caused a big stir and would have been discovered by him long ago. However, he had miscalculated that Kang Qian had not been worshipped in the Law Enforcement Elder sect for long, and many people did not recognize Kang Qian. In the middle of the Forge-Chuan Hall, Zhu Wuin didn't queue up and came directly to the Forge-Chuan stone to start testing. The other law enforcement disciples did not have any grievances about this, as if it was only natural. Elder Li personally arranged for him and watched from the sidelines with a smile on his face. It was rare for a genius like Zhu Wuin to come and test for many years. He also wanted to see how Zhu Wuin had progressed over the past few years. Boom! As Zhu Wuin erupted with all his power, the crowd in the Great Hall immediately felt a powerful pressure. Even if some of the out-of-body stage powerhouses were the same. Obviously, at Zhu Wuin's realm, even at the Yuanying stage, one could cross over and defeat an average low-level outbreathing stage powerhouse. Just like Kang Qian was at the Jidan stage, he could similarly defeat some Yuanying stage powerhouses. Geniuses, all of them could fight across levels. This Zhu Wuin is so strong. A trace of surprise flashed in Kang Qian's eyes as he looked at Zhu Wuin, who had exploded his full strength in front of the Forge-Chuan stone. Regardless of which realm one was in, being able to be named invincible already showed the potential of that person. It could be imagined that once Zhu Wuin was promoted to the exhumation stage, he was afraid that he would directly be a peak exhumation stage powerhouse. Just like how Kang Qian was afraid that once he promoted to the Yuanying stage, he would directly have the strength to be sealed as a king. After all, under the display of Kang Qian's hegemonic blood's strongest battle state, he already had a strength comparable to the peak of the Yuanying stage at this moment. Swish! After Zhu Wuin blasted out his strongest strike, the Forge-Chuan stone erupted with a piercing light. And when the light dispersed, everyone in the Great Hall had their gazes firmly fixed on the Forge-Chuan stone. On that smooth mirror-like surface, a large number slowly emerged. 33. Surprisingly, it was 33 times, and everyone's faces in the Great Hall were filled with shock. Zhu Wuin, however, seemed to be a little dissatisfied, frowning as he looked at the number floating above the Forge-Chuan stone. However, he regained his haughty expression when he felt the awe-inspiring gazes shooting from the surrounding. Engs, Elder Li on the side, also had his eyes light up as he exclaimed, "Zhu Wuin, I didn't expect that in just 10 years you've tripled your strength. It's comparable to the 3 disciples sitting down by the law enforcement elder." Elder Li is flattering. Wuin can't compare to the 3 senior brothers. Back then, the 3rd senior brother in the Yuanying stage had reached 40 times the level. Looking at the entire Heavenly Dao sect, there are few people who can compare to it. Zhu Wuin said indifferently, only that the complacency in his eyes could not be hidden from the crowd. Haha, the disciples that the law enforcement elder accepts are naturally overly talented. But above the Dark Gold Peak, your talent is also second only to the several disciples that the law enforcement elder sits down. with, "I heard that an elder accepted you as a disciple. Why did you refuse?" Elder Li asked with a smile. Among the crowd, Kang Qian couldn't help but be surprised. This Zhu Wuwen even refused an elder. It was too arrogant. The others in the Great Hall had a bashful look on their faces. They obviously knew about this matter long ago. Zhu Wuwen sniffed with a haughty face, as he faintly said, "Although elder law enforcement didn't accept me, but after all, his old man passed down the techniques, and I'm considered to be his named disciple. So I can't worship another person as my master." Elder Li smiled, but did not say any more. A trace of disappointment flashed in his eyes. He had been concerned about Zhu Wusheng for a long time, and also wanted to accept the other party as a disciple. But unfortunately, Zhu Wusheng was too arrogant, and was bent on worshipping under the law enforcement elder. "Kid, although you have good talent, you are still far from the standard of the law enforcement elder. Sadly, the elder of law enforcement even gave you a body refining technique in the hope that you would find another famous teacher to instruct you so as not to delay your life. Sadly." Elder Li sighed darkly in his heart as he shook his head, no longer paying attention to Zhu Wuwen. As a strong person who had been cultivating for thousands of years, Elder Li had seen to many geniuses. Some geniuses always think they are good at what they do, and end up wasting their whole life, only to become an ordinary disciple of the Heavenly Tao sect. Hey, this kid is really arrogant. It's a pity that people like him are the fastest to die in the cultivation world. Dan Huang's laughter resounded in Kang Qian's mind. Kang Qian shook his head. He also felt that Zhu Wuwen was too arrogant. With him reaching the Yuanying stage of cultivation, cultivating the 9 revolutions, Zhuanggong was already impossible. So it was impossible for the law enforcement elder to accept him as a disciple, but he was surprisingly undeterred and wasting his time. After Zhu Wuwen's test, some of the law enforcement disciples among the crowd who knew him surrounded him, and one by one, they sang his praises, describing him as a 1 supreme genius, praising him with a face full of complacency. "Old brother Wuwen, I heard that the law enforcement elder has made an exception to accept a disciple. Old brother really feels bad for you. I don't know how talented that lucky boy is, to make the law enforcement elder make an exception to accept another disciple." The one who spoke was an out-of-body stage powerhouse, who was very close to Zhu Wuwen, and said in a snide manner, "Elder law enforcement's vision is naturally formidable. The disciple that his old man has his eye on is surely a man of honor. When he has the chance, Wuwen will ask for advice." Zhu Wuwen said indifferently, a trace of coldness flashing in his eyes. As the man in the limelight above Dark Gold Peak, he had naturally learnt long ago that elder law enforcement had made an exception to accept a disciple in this sacred ceremony, which made him furious. Could it be that he was still no better than a little guy at the Jidan stage? "I naturally won't doubt the elder of law enforcement's vision, but there's no guarantee that someone won't have deceived the elder of law enforcement with special means. Hey, it's not as if there haven't been such instances before. I heard that in a previous holy ceremony, there was someone who took a forbidden drug, causing his strength to increase 100-fold within a certain period of time, thus confusing a seal elder into accepting him as a disciple. Later on, even though that sealed elder knew the reason, he still had to accept that person in order to save his reputation. Alas, those clans nowadays, in order for their children to worship a famous master, they use all the despicable means they can." That out-of-body stage powerhouse shook his head and said. Kang Qian in the crowd frowned at his words. This out-of-body stage powerhouse seemed to be intent on stirring up conflict between him and Zhu Wuwen. Could it be that he had a grudge against this person? Or was this person purely jealous of himself? "Kid, this guy is definitely deliberately stirring things up. I can guarantee it." Emperor Dan's voice came out. He had lived more fractions of a year than Kang Qian, His vision was naturally venomous, and with a single glance, he could tell that this out-of-body stage was deliberately stirring up the conflict between Kang Qian and Zhu Wuyin. Kang Qian's eyes narrowed as he heard this. He thought that he hadn't offended anyone for so long since he came to Dark Gold Peak. Why was this person doing this? He secretly memorized the face of this outblood stage powerhouse. Who was the one who was talking about my senior brother taking forbidden medicines? Have the guts to say it again in front of me. Suddenly, a cold snort resounded within the grand hall, and immediately, a thick-browed, green-shirted man walked from outside the hall, his gaze icy coldly scanning towards Zhu Wuyin and the outblood stage powerhouse in the crowd. This sudden voice was very familiar. Kang Qian looked towards the visitor and couldn't help but be surprised that it was third senior brother Wuxia Current who had arrived. Wuxia Current at this moment swept away his previous kind face, full of coldness. Those stern eyes swept over Zhu Wuyin's slightly embarrassed face and finally landed on that outbreeding stage powerhouse next to him. Instantly, that outbreeding stage powerhouse had a cold sweat on his face and lowered his head, not daring to speak. Not bad. My master's father didn't even see that my senior brother had taken the forbidden medicine. But you saw it instead, so it seems that my master's father is still no match for you. Dare I ask which Mahayana senior you are? Are you Xu Liu is courteous? Are you Xu Liu stared at the out-of-body stage powerhouse, his eyes cold and full of sarcasm. The surrounding law enforcement disciples didn't dare to make a sound. The pressure Are you Xu Liu gave them was too great. As the personal disciple of the law enforcement elder, other than some of the powerhouses of the God-dividing stage, everyone else had to bow when they saw them. That outbreathing stage powerhouse's legs were trembling, his head was lowered in a cold sweat, and the clothes behind him were soaked through. More powerful than the law enforcement elder's vision. Did he dare to answer? If he dared to answer, his life would immediately be in danger. Although both belonged to the out-of-body stage, he and Ruo Shuiyu couldn't be compared at all. Whether it was in terms of status or strength, he didn't even deserve to mention Ruo Shuiyu's shoes. To know, a genius like Ruo Shuru, before he broke through the out-of-body stage, he could kill an ordinary out-of-body stage powerhouse like him, not to mention that now that Ruo Shuru had broken through the out-of-body stage, his strength was even stronger, and he had even been crowned a king in the out-of-body stage. Unlucky fellow, to be heard by third senior brother. Now you know how powerful it is. The crowd couldn't help but look at this out-of-body stage powerhouse sympathetically. In Dark Gold Peak, no one had dared to offend the disciple of the law enforcement elder. It wasn't that the law enforcement elder was being protective. It was actually Kang Qian's three senior brothers themselves who had fought with strength. The eldest brother, needless to say, in the battlefield of the devil. Even if some of the strong body stage to see him a polite and respectful, who dares to offend him above the Dark Gold Peak? The second elder brother's strength is also not bad. In the heavenly Dao Sex group of holy sons, also belongs to the top of the existence. Not many people dare to provoke. Now that Ruo Shuiyu has broken through the out-of-body stage, his strength is also very powerful. Coupled with the fact that there is a big elder brother and second elder brother above him, no one dares to mess with him. Although the law enforcement elders will not protect the shortcomings, but it does not mean that the eldest brother and the second elder brother will not protect the shortcomings. Once there was someone with a high realm to bully Ruo Shuiyu. As a result of the eldest brother rushed to the blood knife in hand. That person was immediately scared to apologize and make amends, and in the end, also self-slapped 100 slaps before the matter is resolved. In the heavenly Dao sect, apart from a few St. Sung kings, there were not many people who dared to mess with the law enforcement lineage, even if some of the sealed elders were the same. These were the prestige that the few disciples under the seat of the law enforcement elder had fought out with their fists. Third senior brother Li Yun is also just worried about the law enforcement elder being cheated. He didn't show any disrespect. Please be magnanimous and spare him this time. Zhu Wuing finally stepped forward at this time. If he didn't speak up, who would dare to be with him in the future? However, in the face of rivers of ruin, his posture was also very low, and he said with a respectful face, although Zhu Wuing was very arrogant, it didn't mean that he was an idiot. He himself was a genius. But others, Ruoshui Current was even more of a genius among geniuses. In front of Ruoshui Current, he naturally didn't dare to be half arrogant. What's more, Ruoshui was also his senior brother. In the Heavenly Tao sect, respecting one's master and honoring one's elders was the first code of all disciples. No one dared to offend one's master and elders yet, because such a person would be spurned by the entire Heavenly Tao sect. Spare him. Are you ordering me?